It is dawn, and I'm in my F something fighter, and people are putting things like under the wheels and stuff. I don't know too much of the terminology of Top Gun, but this, I believe, is the opening title sequence or the opening title music, and something like that I think is going on. So Top Gun Maverick, which was released to movie theaters originally, where it out-earned like everything, basically. I mean, nothing is even really close in some ways, at least in the pandemic era. I'm not sure any movie has even come close to the kind of money that this movie has made, and now it is available to purchase on streaming platforms. You can get it on Amazon. You apparently cannot do that in Switzerland. We will be giving you information about what you do in Switzerland if you want to see Top Gun Maverick. That will be made available to you privately. But it's time for the nose, and it's time for our great panel to talk about this. And then seeing Top Gun Maverick and this kind of sort of tender scene between Val Kilmer's character and Tom Cruise's character made me think, wow, we should watch Val, which has been a sort of rumbled about documentary about Val Kilmer, released, I believe, last year, also available on Amazon. And Jeff Bezos will be joining the panel later today, too. So we're just keeping it very Amazon. But we're going to talk about that as well. And when I say we, whom do I mean? I mean James Hanley, co-founder of Cine Studio at Trinity College. He's joining us from, I believe, Zurich. That's why we know you can't watch the movie on Amazon in Switzerland. Carolyn Payne is an actress, comedian, a dancer, I believe new car owner, maybe recent car purchaser, something like that. Founder, director, and choreographer of Kinetic Dance. Pedro Soto is president and CEO of High Grade Precision Technologies, where I think they make all of the jets, like all of them, all of the jets that are used in the movies are made in Pedro's shop right there. So
I do have a fact about that I can mention later.
Oh, good. I figured my arrow would strike the ground not too far from some tiny scintilla of truth here. So, Pedro, since you have the floor already, let's talk a little bit about this. This is a long wait for a sequel. It's 36 years from the first movie to the second. That amount of time has more or less kind of apparently elapsed within the reality of the second movie. How did it land, as they say in flying, for you?
It landed amazingly well. I mean, this movie's in my wheelhouse, but getting beyond that, I just absolutely fell in love with this movie. I mean, it is, I think it's actually the longest time between sequels of any major mainstream film, which was incredible. But the movie, in terms of, I think this movie, is just superior to the original. It has an emotional heart, which is way better. And the special effects, the writing, the dialogue, the characters, everything is just so much better. Just perfect summer movie for me.
Right. And out of curiosity, I'm curious to know, because I just watched it at home on my regular equipment. Mm-hmm. I mean, these Tom Cruise movies, they're really kind of made for IMAX. I mean, there's kind of the IMAX experience, and there's probably however James saw it, which I'll be very interested to hear. But how did you consume this?
I watched it. Unfortunately, I wanted to go see this in the theaters, but I couldn't go. So I did see this on my TV, which is on the bigger side, and I do have a home theater system with a subwoofer, so everything was cranked up loud, and it was great. I do wish, and hopefully, since this is still in the theaters, I may try to get out to see it at some point for that experience. But that's how I saw it, and I could tell that I was missing a little bit of the visceral just noise and spectacle of it by seeing it on a smaller screen.
Okay, I have two instant updates. One of them is that Spider-Man No Way Home has actually made more money last year than this movie has so far made this year. And also that, oddly enough, The Color of Money, which starred Tom Cruise and Paul Newman, was a sequel positioned 25 years after The Hustler, the movie that preceded it. So we still have the advantage that you described. Now, Carolyn Payne, we've sent you to any number of movies that you hated over the last, I don't know how many years it's been, or had you watched them at home. So how pleased or displeased were you this time?
So if 10 is like I loved it, and 1 is I'm mad at you for making me watch it. This one comes in at like a 5.
Okay, that would be damning with faint praise, I think, if it were any. But you're sort of the fussy cat of this thing. You're often sniff the food in the bowl and just walk away from it. So say a little bit more about that 5.
Yeah, so I mean, it was watchable in that it held my interest, although about like halfway through I realized that they had just kind of like repurposed Star Wars New Hope, and and throughout most of the movie, I think one of my biggest complaints was I kind of felt like motion sick the whole time. Like, I definitely would not be an F-18 fighter pilot. I just felt like kind of nauseous throughout most of this movie as they were like spinning upside down in their planes, and the way it was filmed, really, I was like, I need a Dramamine. But I mean, it held my interest. I didn't fall asleep or have the urge to turn it off and just try to Google what happened, because that is something that happens with a lot of things that I have to watch for the nose. I get tempted to just do that. But so, I mean, and also, I mean, I have to disclose, like I think maybe I saw part of the original Top Gun, maybe a very long time ago. So it wasn't something that I had a lot of vested interest in. I mean, it stood up alone as its own movie. It was fine. Like, I can see why a lot of people would like it.
I'm sure they can't wait to blurb this. It was fine. What do you want? What do you want from me? It was fine. Carolyn Payne, WNPR. All right. So, James, I do want to hear how you saw the movie, but also, and I'm stealing a little bit of this from Dan Coyce from Slate, who I just heard talking about this. There's sort of a weird thing that goes on there's a lot, in my opinion, of weird things that go on in this movie. But one of the things that happens at the start is that Ed Harris plays this general or admiral or something, and he's like all into drones. He's the drone lord, and he's just basically thinks pilots are just so last year, and this whole idea that the sooner we get rid of these human beings flying deadly pieces of warfare, the better. And then there's sort of this way in which Tom Cruise's character Pete Mitchell reasserts the human element here, and the important humanity of all this. And there's a way in which that is kind of mirrored by the actual production of this movie, in the sense that, Cruise and all these other actors, I mean, they really, really train for this stuff, and they go up in the plane. Sometimes when you see them, they're actually in one of these damn jets up in the air with a, IMAX camera pointed at them or something. And in an era where that kind of stuff is also sort of on the way out. You just put Mark Ruffalo on a soundstage in Vancouver, and then just add in everything else in a bunch of other, post-production studios. There's a way in which Cruise is kind of asserting. He's a throwbacky guy anyway, right? He doesn't like stunt doubles. He wants to like really be the guy in the movie. Give me some James Hanley type reactions to that.
Well, I think that he's actually one of those few people in the industry who actually commands enough money that he can bully somebody like Paramount and actually insist that the movie play in theaters rather than actually go on streaming within 40 days or less, actually, they wanted. And I think that he's been proved right in terms of the grosses, of course, but I think he has much of a sort of commonality with somebody like Christopher Nolan in the sense of seeing theaters. I think that obviously there's something, I mean, you asked earlier how I saw it. I saw it on a big screen in a theater with Dolby Atmos, not IMAX. It's no longer playing here in IMAX, but it's certainly a film that it envelops you in the theater, and it's a thrilling ride, and lots of things about it are like very satisfying cinematically. And it makes me think actually that you talk about green screen and paralleling it with the takeover of warfare by drones. In terms of movies that are made with green screens, which is very attractive to distributors and film studios because it's much, much cheaper. I think that this represents something really generational about how people are watching a movie. I mean, they went up in these planes with not just one IMAX camera. Unfortunately, they were digital, but still, they were IMAX cameras. There were more than one in some of those planes, and they really created a visceral sense that I think that those green screen CGI created environments that people have become so used to that now there's a generation of people who can actually see something different. And this really has some different things about it as a result of this sort of almost analog mechanical part to it. Obviously, the CGI is there and is part of it, but I think it's a very different kind of phenomenon. And I think it may be influential simply because of all the money it's made. And I think that the people who are coming to see it, probably many of them may not have seen the original. So it's like a standalone of something that really represents a paradigm shift, really, in an almost physical sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's sort of on the surface of it, it's a weird decision because not that many people in the audience would have been saying under other circumstances, wow, well, I've flown F-18s and it's nothing like that. You know, they haven't really sort of captured that. So, I mean, they're doing something else. They're rewarding us, I think, in the way that you suggest, in a different way. We don't know how close that is to an approximation of flying a fighter jet, but we do know that it's maybe exciting in a different and less flat way than we sometimes feel about the CGI. All right, before we say more, let's hear a little bit from the film. You're going to hear, do I have to say who everybody is? I guess I do. So this is going to be A1, Katie. You're going to hear Charles Parnell as Admiral Solomon, Warlock Bates, Tom Cruise as Captain Pete, Maverick Mitchell, and John Hamm as Admiral Bo Cyclone Simpson. Here we go.
What's your read, Captain?
Well, sir, normally this would be a cakewalk for the F-35 stealth, but the GPS jamming negates that. Surface-to-air threat necessitates a low-level, laser-guided strike, tailor-made for the F-18, I figure. 2 precision bombs, minimum, makes it 4 aircraft, flying in pairs. That is one hell of a steep climb out of there, exposing you to all the surface-to-air missiles. Or you survive that, it's a dogfight all the way home.
All requirements for which you have real-world experience.
Not the same mission, sir. No, someone's not coming back from this.
Can it be done or not?
How soon before the plant becomes operational?
3 weeks, maybe less.
Well, it's been a while since I've flown an F-18, and I'm not sure who I trust to fly the other 3, but I'll find a way to make it work.
I think you misunderstand, Captain.
Sir?
We don't want you to fly it. We want you to teach it.
Teach, sir?
So I think in a way that the first movie doesn't, this movie at least posits or tries to create the notion of a journey for the Maverick character. And so Pedro, the whole idea is he has to, instead of being this kind of elite loner, which he is, I think even at the beginning of this movie, is he like living in an aircraft hangar or something? It's just like he's clearly...
Yeah, I think he's living at the end of the runway where they're testing the plane at the beginning, fixing his even older airplane, which incidentally is Tom Cruise's own P-51 Mustang. He owns that plane. Right. And yeah, he's just there alone doing his thing with his old motorcycle. But
there's a little bit of a different notion here about who this person is. 36 years have gone by. He's still a captain. Val Kilmer's character is now an admiral and maybe even bigger than an admiral. And you know, he's, I don't know, his credit card gets declined in bars, and he's just, you know, there's something slightly down at the heels here. There's a way in which an era really is passing him by, or he's just getting too old to be the guy that he was, but he hasn't figured out anybody else to be. And so this is that moment where he's going to learn something else. And I guess I'm wondering how well you think this movie kind of ultimately delivers on the implied promise that Maverick, Pete Mitchell, is going on a journey, and he's going to learn how to do team building and how to transfer his skills to other people and not be such a big egoistic jerk. I don't know. Go ahead.
One of the biggest kind of complaints I have about these, like, long between kind of reboots that have been happening, like Mad About You, or all these shows where the characters come back 20 or 30 years later, is how they're all kind of depressing because everyone's so old and everything's so different, and they're either trying to like be how they were a long time ago, or they're just old and it's a different thing and it just feels sad. And I think that because Tom Cruise is kind of ageless, because I think that was sort of the intent, I think this works as this journey in a lot of ways. I think it pays off. I think they do a very good job of him being, rather than kind of old and obsolete, I think it's that he's just kind of more static, and there's unresolved things he needs to really get through to be able to kind of get through, the final phase of his life. And I think that they do that really well. And I think that like the opening scenes, you can see that like people really still respect him. So he's not washed up. Obviously the brass always hate him, but that's been his signature the whole life. But you can see like in the control room scene at the beginning, we can see with Hondo, with all these people, like everyone really, really loves him. He's just the guy that's just been kind of doing the same thing forever. And he needs to resolve the relationships in his life so he can kind of live his quote best life at the end of the movie.
So, Carolyn, as you may know from our communications before the show, I have this sort of theory that nobody in this movie has much reality except for Maverick, that everybody in the movie is essentially kind of refracted through the lenses of Maverick's eyes, that nobody's character is particularly well developed, and Ed Harris is there just to be this hard-ass guy who wants to convert to drones. That whole idea is immediately dropped, by the way, after the first few minutes of the movie. John Hamm is another hard-ass guy who seems to maybe, convert a little bit along the way, but, once again, not a well-developed character. And I think most of the flyers are kind of like that. Bill Pullman's son, Lewis, plays the kind of nerdy, bespectacled guy whose name is Bob. He doesn't have a cool handle. But I mean, nothing's really done with that. I mean, maybe an exception is Jennifer Connelly, who plays kind of the love interest in this. She plays Penny, who owns a bar, and they appear to have had some relationships in the past that ended in heartbreak, maybe even multiple times. But Carolyn, even that part, I don't think it's written especially well. I think you could argue that Jennifer Connelly takes it and makes that character something other than just something that is in Maverick's field of vision. I was just sort of wondering what you're thinking about the characters, the acting, and maybe specifically Connelly.
Yeah, I mean, I do very strongly feel like this movie, you are not watching this movie for character development or Oscar-winning like acting performances. This movie is clearly just an action movie that has a sense of nostalgia. And that weird football scene that looks like an Abercrombie ad from like circa 2000. I guess, yes, an argument could be made that Jennifer Connelly delivers the performance with the most heart. I wasn't like wowed by that, and I found myself just not even caring. I was not invested at all in their relationship. I think that for me, one of the strongest performances was Val Kilmer. I think that scene with Tom Cruise and Val Kilmer was probably, probably one of the most well done and interesting as far as performances go, especially like knowing kind of more into Val Kilmer and his health struggles and everything, and how they made that part of his character. That was interesting. I just felt like, this movie, it's shallow. It's shallow. And if you find it fun to watch like cool planes flying on a cool mission and, it's fine on that level. But I mean, I didn't go into it expecting any sort of depth, and it definitely delivered with, just kind of surface level action fun.
All right. James, I'm just going to let you react to what we've said so far.
Well, I think I agree with Carolyn, and I think that that's actually a very strong sort of, corporate decision. They're not going to, in a film like this, which is really attempting to reinvent a kind of genre, a different kind of action movie, and it's going to have certain elements. Like one of the issues is that they worried about, and the first thing is, is it just going to draw guys to come and see it? And so, they say, oh, well, okay, we've got to have a woman in it to draw some more women into the audience. These are very sort of commercial decisions that get made about a film like this. And I think that it's really, I found it interesting and entertaining as an action movie, but it's except for that scene with Val Kilmer, which for many reasons is kind of touching. It really would seem character development would seem to stop the action and actually trip the film up. It's one of those curious things because I mean, I'm always watching movies with the idea that I want to know more about character and I want character development. But in a movie like this, you can see how the thinking would be that, okay, this is going to detract from the attention of an audience that is seeking the next thrill. And the only thing character-wise really is kind of oblique, which is Tom Cruise himself, which is the fact that he can play this part and be in this part after so long in the industry, playing different parts since the original Top Gun. And he looks so capable, he looks so good, and he's playing the part very seriously. He is sort of the character, the only character, I think, in the movie that has any significance.
Yes, I totally agree with that. I actually do believe that, as I said, I feel like almost nobody has any existential status in this movie besides Tom Cruise, besides Pete Mitchell. He is sort of the way in which everything is understood. And that kind of maybe leads to me to maybe the last thing we'll have time for, which is just, I'd love to hear each of you, starting with you, Pedro, kind of reflect on your own relationship with Tom Cruise, so to speak. I mean, I'll begin by saying I'm actually kind of a Tom Cruise fan, or at least I know if Tom Cruise is starring in a movie, you know, it's probably going to be reasonably good. It's going to be professionally handled. As you've pointed out, he's kind of a control freak, and he made them reshoot the football scene that Carolyn was talking about, which Carolyn, in her innocence, may not realize was necessary because of a volleyball scene in the original movie. But there's sort of a sense in which, whether it's Jerry Maguire or Rain Man or you know, A Few Good Men or Collateral or one of the big franchise things like Mission Impossible, I feel like Tom Cruise he's going to give me something that I've learned to expect from him, and he's probably not going to disappoint me very much, partly because my expectations aren't too high. I'm not, you know, expecting some master thespian to come out there. But also because, you know, I don't know. He's really, really dedicated to being Tom Cruise in a way that most of us probably aren't as dedicated to being ourselves. But I'd love to hear from all of you. Pedro, get us started.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that, like, on the balance, most of the Tom Cruise movies that are out there, I really enjoy. I think that, you know, my issues with the sort of the whole Scientology thing and his personal persona has always made it a little more complicated for latter day Tom Cruise for me to be as sort of unequivocal of sort of like a fan. But I will say that I think the earlier stuff, going up to sort of the early 2000s, I think he was pretty wide ranging, and there was a lot of really great films and different types of films. You know, I absolutely love A Few Good Men. That's one of my all-time favorites. But you know, he did Jerry Maguire, right? He did. I think he was. You know, he had cameos in like Austin Powers, Goldmember. He was in Interview with a Vampire. I mean, just lots of different things. So I really enjoyed that. I think the sort of latter day Tom Cruise has really narrowed his focus to basically doing like Mission Impossible, something like Top Gun. You know, I don't think we're going to see like an indie movie Tom Cruise movie from here on out.
You don't think he's going to do another Paul Thomas Anderson movie like Magnolia?
Exactly.
I agree.
I think he's going to work with like Chris McQuarrie. I think he's going to work with like basically his sort of team of people to do, you know, these big budget movies. And maybe it'll be proven wrong. Maybe Top Gun will give him a little freedom or something. But I think that's, you know, to be seen.
All right, Carolyn, how about you? How do you and Tom Cruise get along?
Well, I don't think we would, but I'm not really a Tom Cruise fan per se. I think that like nowadays I kind of just still picture him like jumping up and down on the couch on like the talk show. I mean, I liked him in some stuff. I mean, I really loved Interview with a Vampire, and I think he was really good in that. For me, that worked, that Tom Cruise worked in that. But I'm sitting, as Pedro was talking, I was trying to think about like movies that I've seen Tom Cruise in. Like, I know he is, in some ways, he's kind of this like last great Hollywood star, you know, or movie star really, who does these like major box office hits. And I I can't really think of anything that I'm like, yes, I love Tom Cruise. But I mean, I guess I just don't really think about him all that much.
Well, he doesn't think about you that much either, so I think it's okay.
I guess, you know what? Yeah, we're fair. We're fair.
He's tried to put you out of his mind using his Thetan skills.
Well, I did recently read that apparently Brad Pitt has a list of actors that he does not ever want to work with, and allegedly Tom Cruise is on it. Following their, so
I'm sure Val Kilmer is or was too, but so
that might be mutual.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
So James, yeah, I mean, Carol had talked about Cruise being kind of the last of a certain kind of movie star, and you do hear that a lot, right? That he's kind of this guy who really can just sort of carry a movie just by his Tom Cruise-ness.
Yeah, I think Carolyn hit the nail on the head with that. I mean, I think that I think of somebody in the film industry of the past, like Cary Grant or something like that, that these are personality. Tom Cruise is a personality who appears in movies, and he's really such a figure that he eclipses any thought of, I guess, who he is as a human being. And I mean, there have been some pretty I don't know, irritating aspects of it that have popped out over the years of his real life, if you like. But I can't think of anybody else who's in the industry right now who commands that sort of image that he really is on his own, and that when he appears in a film, he's really appearing as himself, as the persona he's decided to assume as an actor. And it doesn't really change. And I think he's very talented in doing that, but certainly it's not going to be something that you're really going to know much about the character beyond being presented as the hero.
He doesn't do a lot of subtext. So, yes, I just want to sort of close out this segment by saying one last thing, which is that after watching this movie, and I really enjoyed it. I was very, very entertained. And I think the first movie is terrible. I think it's like a bad movie. I didn't see it when it came out. I watched it recently. I think it's awful. But then I encountered this thing. Because I watched the movie and I thought, they're just sort of weird the way nobody else is real, except for Pete Mitchell. And I encountered this online kind of conspiracy theory fan idea that basically Tom Cruise's character dies in the first 5 minutes and he's dead for the rest of the movie, and this is just like some kind of Jacob's Ladder type weird, sort of post-death hallucination thing or something. And I thought, I'm sure that's not true from the point of view of the filmmakers, but the movie makes a lot more sense if that's the case. So if you decide to watch it again, Top Gun Maverick, just watch it with the understanding that maybe everybody's dead or not real anyway. Okay, we'll take a break.
Top Gun Matrix.
That's right there. Top Gun Matrix, exactly. And we know, by the way, that there's going to be Top Gun 3, Top Gun Assisted Living, where finally Pete Mitchell gets old and it turns out that Jennifer Connelly's daughter is really his kid and she's a pilot now. And I mean, you could just write this whole movie out in the back of a cocktail napkin. All right, we've got to take a break. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about Val. All right, we're back. We are here with our terrific panel, James Hanley, Carolyn Payne, Pedro Soto. So watching... I just got a Kenny Loggins hiccup in my brain. So watching Top Gun Maverick, there is this kind of tender scene with Val Kilmer and Tom Cruise. He's playing the same character, Iceman. He still comes up on Pete Mitchell's phone as Ice, but now he's like a big shot admiral, and he's kind of been looking after Tom Cruise's character all the way through his life and getting him out of scrapes and stuff like that, and valuing him. And then they have this kind of talk, and they've written Val Kilmer's own actual medical condition, which is throat cancer, into the role, and his wife says it's come back or something like that as Maverick walks into the room. And I believe that although they did use Kilmer's voice, they had to technologically kind of sweeten it up a little bit anyway. He has great difficulty talking these days. And, it just made me think, wow, because there's just something about this. It's not like the rest of the movie. It kind of grabs you just in the way that you know about these two men, one of whom, by the way, is a Scientologist, and the other of whom is apparently kind of imbued with the Christian Science faith of his family. And they're both very difficult people, apparently. And I thought we should watch Val. Val is this 2021 documentary directed by Leo Scott and Ting Pu, written and photographed by Val Kilmer. It is absolutely 100% Val Kilmer's attempt to tell his own story, but I'll let him tell you about that. Katie, this is B1 from Val.
My name is Val Kilmer. I've lived a magical life, and I've captured quite a bit of it. I was the first guy I knew to own a video camera. I have thousands of hours of videotapes and film reels that I've shot throughout my life and career. I've wanted to tell a story about acting for a very long time. About the place where you end and the character begins. About truth and illusion. Now that it's more difficult to speak, I want to tell my story more than ever. A story about my life. That is also not my life.
So the first thing that I have to tell you is that's Jack Kilmer, Val Kilmer's son, who is speaking for him. Val Kilmer cannot deliver things in that kind of a voice these days. I think in some ways the most important thing is that line at the end, a story about my life that is also not my life. Because, James, this movie, it's a very peculiar movie. It's a kind of autobiographical documentary, except not exactly autobiographical. It is made possible partly by the fact that Val Kilmer apparently was a very early adopter of handheld video cameras just for normal consumer use, and maybe movie cameras before that, and has therefore recorded just insane amounts of footage of his own life. I don't know. What did you think of all this?
Well, I actually found it a fascinating film for lots of reasons. I actually like Val Kilmer a lot for a number of films, but it's very interesting. And the touching part of it is that he comes across as being an honest and happy person amidst a lot of adversity and a lot of strange things that have happened, including his exclusion from Hollywood circles because he was labeled as difficult. And he really, in a way, at the start of his career, it's almost as if he could have been a Tom Cruise type of actor in films, in that he had these striking looks and a personality that could easily have carried that, but he clearly didn't want that, and he wanted to do the very thing that is not the case with Tom Cruise, which is developing character, depth of character that really resonates in a way that is very personal to him. And at the same time, you feel a sense of loss for him. You feel that he's unfulfilled in some ways, but then on another level, he's saying how happy he is. And I must say, throughout the movie, he seems to be radiating that. He kind of radiates a good feeling about himself. Much as I might disagree with a lot of things, like praying away the cancer and that not acknowledging that he had cancer at all, in fact, and blaming it on the radiation treatment that he had, there's a lot of unreality there, which is kind of strange. But at the same time, he comes across as an extraordinary survivor. And I have to say, my own sort of experience, in particular, The Doors, which I know wasn't a huge success as a film, but I remember us showing it in 70 millimeter at Cine Studio and sitting in the middle of the theater and being completely lost in his character, as if he were, he were the real Jim Morrison, and he's really took on that role and some other later roles of his. So it's a really interestingly complex thing. I'm really glad I saw it.
Right. I think it's in the Taffy Brodesser-Aiken piece from the New York Times it's a long feature about Val Kilmer that I circulated. I think she says that Jim Morrison performance is so powerful she actually started to forget what Jim Morrison really looked like. Now her idea of Jim Morrison is Val Kilmer, which I think an iconic performance can actually do. Although with somebody as indelible as Morrison, that's quite a statement. So Carolyn, you've already kind of hinted a little bit at your thoughts about Val Kilmer, but this documentary, I don't know, it's telling a story. I'm not exactly sure it is the story of Val Kilmer. If so, an awful lot is being selectively left out. But just describe the experience of watching it.
Well, it's kind of like watching somebody's life through their own Instagram reels and TikToks. Like, he's presenting what he wants you to see and what he wants to remember and, be nostalgic about. And so, I mean, it's not so much of a documentary as it's really just like kind of this autobiographical, memory piece of that, where he just compiles a bunch of old videos he had, which is interesting because he was in an era where you didn't have that much. But I was just I turned this off after finishing it, and I felt really overwhelmingly sad. Just because I think, like I said in an email to all of you, I think as an artist, like, you set out wanting to create and you have this vision of like really fulfilling that and leaving this mark. And I felt that this documentary kind of showed a man who felt incomplete in what he has wanted to do. And he's now looking for other ways to like leave his mark and be an artist because, he was started out as this Juilliard trained promising actor, and his career wasn't what he wanted. He never became that Hamlet and never was like Marlon Brando, although it was interesting, his story of working with Marlon Brando turning into a disaster. I felt really bummed out by this. And also kind of felt like it was sort of it just was odd to kind of watch somebody create this like documentary of their own life in such an angled way.
Right. In a way, there is a real parallelism, a Papulian through line from Val to Top Gun Maverick, particularly in the sense that nobody else seems particularly real in this movie either. It's really a movie in which Val Kilmer, I don't even think his kids seem particularly real, and he doesn't really seem to be very interested in anybody else either. I mean, what's it like to work with Tom Cruise? Who knows? He doesn't care about anything like that. He's not going to tell you anything like that. There just isn't. And what there is, I think, is this sense, and the other sort of Papulian through line is, theoretically, Maverick has to learn team building, and he has to learn how to incorporate his own abilities into a larger team, which he's never been particularly good at. And this is, I think, very much the story of Val Kilmer, too, not being able to integrate his incredible good looks and his prodigious acting ability and his incredible commitment to roles into the kind of team process of making a movie. It's only hinted at here, but if you read more about it, you just realize this guy's just incredibly difficult. I mean, Daniel Day-Lewis is like that, and when he did My Left Foot, he made the crew carry him around on the set when they weren't filming because he refused to not be that guy, even to go up and go get a drink of water or something, but somehow or other Daniel Day-Lewis doesn't make it impossible for everybody else and make them all feel paranoid and like they really want to be out of the situation. And I feel like Kilmer, hinted at in there is the fact that Kilmer could never really do that. So Pedro, how about you? Tell us about how Val worked for you.
Well, I think to continue that thought of the team building and working with others, I think having a disease such as cancer and being as impacted as he is, and you see in the film, now forces and seeing, and I have actually, personal experience with family member of my father who had a tracheotomy and lost his ability to speak due to COPD, and and seeing sort of the requirements of having really to having someone who was a very consummate self-sufficient person having to rely on now a team of people to kind of get them through the life. And you can see the whole creation of this film and his family and everyone. He now has to rely on a great many people, including his fans, I would say, to be able to kind of have his life have some sort of quality. The movie was definitely striking for me. I think it really is. I really felt it was Val Kilmer needing to come to terms with where he is, and with Val Kilmer, sort of the actor, Val Kilmer, the person, and a way of sort of coming to a statement of being okay with his life and being sort of satisfied with it. I think that you can see in the film, you can see that there was an arc that he was trying to take and go with this, the Mark Twain thing at the end. And, that he felt that he was on his way to do that, and that cancer derailed it. And so this is, I think, his attempt to kind of reestablish himself personally. So it felt, even though it was a film that was solely about Val Kilmer, I think that, or a documentary, I think it really was just himself trying to figure out himself.
Right. That's a great point. I think the film is brutally honest about the present. I mean, there's a scene where he's like signing autographs at some horrible, movie fan convention. And then he gets worn out and they have to sort of take him someplace else. And I think that's where you see him like puke into a wastepaper basket or something, because he's just so wiped out from this disease. It's much more honest about the present than it is about the past, which he's sort of really, I think, carefully curated in a way. But it's you certainly want to watch this. If you do watch it, then find the Taffy Brodesser-Aiken profile, because it actually does sort of patch in a bunch of stuff that I think is left out, perhaps lamentably, from the movie. But the movie itself, I think we all agree, is pretty engrossing. All right, let's take a break. We'll have time to make some quick recommendations on the other side.
I am a cinematographer. Oh, I am a cinematographer. I am a cinematographer. And I walked away from New York City. And I walked away from...
All right, time to say our thank yous to Kat Pastor's not around right now. Today's show was technically produced by the big kid, Katie Tolarski, call sign Coach T. And the episode was produced by Jonathan McNichol, call sign Pants. He needs a better, is that what this is called, a call sign? Is that what those things are called? Who knows? Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes. It's a call sign. Okay. You need Pants, you need something better than that. We'll have to work on that. Pants, it's not going to look good on the side of your F-18. All right, so time to make some recommendations. Pedro Soto, why don't you get us going?
Sure. In the vein of sort of aerospace and aviation, actually just rewatched again. It came out in 2016, but it's a PBS series called City in the Sky, and it's not about military aviation, but it's about commercial aviation. It's a 3-episode series, really about what it takes to transport. The reason they call it City in the Sky is that at any given time, in the world, there are approximately 1 million people in the air, which is a crazy thought, but it's basically a 1 million person city in the sky. And from how the planes are built to what it takes to get them and control them all and transfer and make sure they all get there, to seeing what it takes to actually take a horse from one country to another. It's a really great PBS documentary that if you've ever been interested in what it takes to get you from one city to another in the air, that you'll greatly enjoy it. All
right. Thanks so much for that. Carolyn Payne, what have you got for us?
Okay, so I watched on Netflix Trainwreck, the Woodstock 99 documentary. And I was a teenager when Woodstock 99 was happening. And I remember really wanting to go. My father had gone to Woodstock in '69, and I felt like it was my birthright to get to go to this Woodstock. My parents were like, absolutely no. After watching this documentary, I'm really glad that they had the common sense to not allow their young teenager to go to this madness. It's a really fascinating documentary about this festival, how they tried to take that like peace, love, and music of Woodstock 69 and bring it into the generation of the kids of the 90s and how it failed. It has really fascinating interviews with the musicians. And I mean, it basically just makes Woodstock 99 look like the first Fire Festival. And it was literally on fire. So it's definitely worth the watch, especially if you're like me and you're kind of that generation where you were a teenager that this was like marketed to and had all your bands and singers that you loved. And it's also just kind of appalling the way that the people, it just is appalling for the millennial generation, but as one of them, but it's good. It's an interesting watch.
All right. You've really sold it, sort of. James Hanley, how about you? What are you going to recommend to us?
I think a few years ago, I mentioned a book by a German writer, Peter Wohlleben, who wrote a book called The Hidden Life of Trees, which was absolutely fascinating in itself. But he's written a new book called The Heartbeat of Trees, which is really about forests and trees and how they exist on the planet and then what our relationship is with trees. And it's not dry and scientific, if you like, at all. It's really an extraordinary, insightful piece of writing that's really amazing to read. The Heartbeat of Trees, Peter Wohlleben. And then the other thing is a movie which has been out a while, but I don't think many people saw looking at the grosses. It's called Memoria with Tilda Swinton. It was described in the original publicity as being science fiction, which is really not. It's kind of like a mystery, really, but an absolutely beguiling, extraordinary piece of filmmaking that is one of those films that actually manages to get you to slow down and go at the movie's pace, which is very contemplative in terms of just watching what's happening and picking up the details. Memoria with Tilda Swinton, my favorite.
Okay, great. So I thought I would try to recommend the one each of a movie connected to the two movie stars we talked about. I'll start with Val Kilmer. You know, most people have seen Heat by now, the Michael Mann thing, but watch it again with a real focus on what Kilmer's doing in this movie, because it is hard to stand out in a movie that has Pacino and De Niro kind of going head to head, and is surrounded by just other terrific actors, including two Hartford-born stalwarts, Amy Brenneman and Diane Venora. But Kilmer is doing amazing stuff, and I think it's in the Brodesser Aiken piece. She says like the most chilling moment of the movie is really when a cop is looking at his fake ID and kind of what he does with all that. But he has a kind of stillness in the movie that is, I think, really, really different from the energy that's coming out from all the other people. And so he really is terrific and very magnetic in it. And then for Tom Cruise, and I realized a lot of years have passed, and there are probably some ways in which the kind of sex worker part of this is politically incorrect at this point, and it probably should be, I would add. But the movie Risky Business, which is like, you know, one of the big kind of Tom Cruise launch movies, it's really funny, and he's really funny, and God knows Joe Pantoliano, Joey Pants, as Guido the Killer Pimp. I mean, he will be Guido the Killer Pimp for the rest of his life. Is hilarious, and so there aren't a lot of really funny Tom Cruise comedies, but this is one. So Risky Business and Heat. And you can cover both of these actors in one weekend. Thanks for listening today. Thanks to everybody who helped out, especially Coach T. And we will be back on Monday.